welcome back. I just got back from a work trip to Georgia, so spent a week down there doing some masonry repairs. Now I'm back on this job and just spoke with my instructor in Germany. He's approving everything that I've done so far. I'm going to set this last fire brick and then show you what's going on. So here's my brick base for this masonry heater. So what I did is I used old fire bricks that we had around to build up the concrete base to the height that we needed, which happened to be right about 4 inches based on our computer model. And then I carefully sketched out onto this base the given dimensions that we had from the plan. Now our dimensions are all in centimeters, so I had to make a bunch of conversions to get my dimensions, but just being meticulous, it was straightforward enough. So now what I have in this fire brick set with refractory mortar floor plan is the fire chamber, then the flue passages winding their way back, and then there will be additional flue passages stacked on top of these ones. So in order to get that, I just used the plan that we had, which was already mapped out with the computer model, adjusted a couple of things by a ½ inch here and there to fit the actual as-built dimensions, and then sketched everything onto this brick base. Now that this side is done, I'm going to start working on the other side, which is just the kitchen, cooktop, and bake oven side. So right now I have sketched out in chalk. I started with pencil and then went back over it with white chalk to help it just kind of stay clear and easy to follow. I have the floor plan mapped out for the fire chamber for the kitchen side, this rectangle, and then extending back behind it, both the flues extending back to the base of the chimney, which then just goes vertically up to line up with our chimney flues here. So now that we have the big, more complicated side done, I'm going to set out my fire bricks, get them all cut to size, and then start to put these in place using the refractory clay that we have. This is only my second time working with refractory mortar. One time I used it with some other people during my apprenticeship. We were building a fireplace. This stuff we got, it's all pre-mixed from Harbis & Walker Company. It's supposed to be an industry standard. I don't have a ton of experience with fire clay, but it seems great. So in order to figure out dimensions for this base, I'll just be taking my bricks and then setting them the width of a mortar joint apart, and then carefully to the line. What I want to do is minimize cutting and also come away without any small slivers of brick that I'm having to add on the sides to get to the right dimension. I'd rather avoid that. So if I need to, I'll make adjustments with how I'm trimming brick. This will be a typical staggered offset. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and start with a full brick. It looks like this may just work out to be 3 bricks precisely. Sure enough, that's really handy. So this is probably a 1/4 inch long here, but it's a 1/4 inch in the right direction where I'm having to trim off a 1/4 inch rather than add a little tiny sliver. So I'll go ahead and mark this brick to be cut, and then I'll use a square to transfer that mark around. And then here I'll mark a brick at half its length. These are just under 9, so we'll do just under 4.5. and then gap that for half of a mortar joint there. Then what will go here is my starter brick, which is just going to be a regular fire brick that I've split directly in half. So that's good. I know I don't have to do any weird offsets here. I can do a regular starter, just a half brick. I'll be trimming off about 1/4 inch from this last brick to get to my overall length. So now I'll start reusing bricks to figure out the rest of my layout. I find that this is really the best way to do it, as opposed to measuring everything out. That can be helpful, and sometimes I'll start that way. But when you're getting close to final layout, it's really most helpful to use the bricks, because if I'm doing it all with a tape measure, it's one thing to see it in dimensions. It's another thing to have the bricks physically laid out in front of you and be accounting for mortar joints. So we're back at the heater, and I have the first 2 courses of fire brick laid up, and this shows both the combustion chamber and then starting to get into the flue passages that are going to carry the flue gases over for this first run. Then we're up to the height where I need to start thinking about roughing in for the door. So the doors, we got this hardware from Fire Speaking. They do hardware for masonry heaters out of Oregon. The door is going to be roughed in right here, centered on the combustion chamber. So I'm going to build up my remaining courses of brick, gapped off the edge of this by 1/4 inch to allow for expansion and contraction. I'm going to have to put a small notch in the corner of my fire brick to give me enough room to do that. And then when I come up with these thinner 12 by 12 by 1.5 inch tiles on the outside, those are going to sit just on the inside of this flange. So to kind of walk through this masonry heater, right here we've got the combustion chamber, and this is going to be where the main fire is loaded and fired, and then the flue gases are going to come from here up over this. This will be built up another couple of courses, down underneath this, up and over, down under, and then they're going to run along this flue channel, pop up again here in the corner, run back, and then there are more flues here before exiting the chimney. But to go over the basics, all of these fire brick are being laid on edge, so it is shiners. All of this is refractory mortar. All of our supplies came from Harvest and Walker. I have brickwork, fairly typical brickwork going on here, and by that, all that I mean is, like with any masonry material, you want to be offsetting your joints in order to be dependent not on the mortar, but on the structural component, which is your masonry unit, be it brick or stone. So I have typical brickwork going on, coursing that's offset, and then everywhere that I can, I'm trying to rely on notching into my masonry to not be dependent on the strength of the mortar. Mortar is a filler material, and it's excellent in bearing. It's very good at under compression. It should not be used typically as a glue. It's wrong to think about it as a glue material. It's more of a filler material that can perfectly match and infill around the masonry units. So I have brickwork going on. I'm notched in wherever I can be. These notches are simple to make. I'm just doing this with a grinder with a diamond wheel and then chipping them out with a little stone chisel. The most complicated thing about this has been the layout. Just trying to make sure that we're either right on or very close to all the specs, because our friend who designed this has a number for each individual flue size, flue opening, height. So trying to match all of those has by far taken the longest amount of time. All of this work has taken me slightly over a day. I had a few of these brick in last night, and I'm close to the end of the day today. Here on these flue channels, again, I'm trying to rely more on the strength of the masonry than on any mortar gluing things together. So these are going to get infilled with 1.5-inch fire brick tiles. So when the time comes, I'll cut these down, leaving about 1/8 of an inch on each side, both for a mortar joint, because the mortar is going to get in there and seal those flue gases, and also so that as minimally as it will be, this can still expand and contract just a little bit with heat. So I've notched my fire brick everywhere that I'm going to get these tiles set. The back of this brick is actually notched too, and they're going to sit on this shelf until they come over here, exit, go up into the next run of flues up here. So I'm working on getting the second set of masonry flues in place. All of this has taken me a long time. This is most of another day's worth of work here, but I have the first set of flues capped. So you can see right now how the smoke would continue over the back wall of the fire chamber. I'm starting to frame the opening for the door there, giving myself about 1/4 inch of expansion on each side. But the smoke and flue gases are going to flow up over the back wall, drop down below, underneath this partition, up over this one. This will be raised several more courses still, up and over and down to run through that first flue. Then that will run underneath these caps, along these channels, and up and out, at which point it then does a U-turn, flows back through this, and then right now I just have a pencil mark sketching out where it's then going to exit these flues and come out. So I'm now ready to cap the second run of flues. I have this built up to the height that our friend spec'd for this flue channel. And where before, on the first run of flues, I notched them into the course of fire brick below. That was just because the height happened to work out just right, where with my 1.5-inch flue tiles that cap this, they sat just flush with the top surface. I needed 8 inches of clearance, and with a mortar joint, these came to 9.5 inches tall. 2 runs of bricks, 2 courses of bricks built up. So I notched 1.5 inches, actually closer to 1 5/8 inches a shelf into my first course of brick to catch these caps. And then I had a ledger with that extra 1/8 inch being my mud joint. I had a ledger to catch my caps. So I set those in, and then I've just built directly up on top of that. So you don't see them looking at the outside coursing. It's just continuous fire brick. But then the second flue height is a little bit shorter. And in order to meet that height, I just made several rips with my grinder and cut 1-inch spacers out of fire brick. So then with my 1/4 inch mud joint, top and bottom, that'll give me my 6 1/4 that I needed for the height of this flue. So I'll cap that, it'll exit out of here, and then it'll run left to right, back and forth a couple more times before continuing up and leaving through the chimneys. So before I cap this set of flues with my 1.5 inch tiles, I'll sponge down these joints, and I'm just trying to kind of blend together any little voids that might exist to help just make everything sealed, and also just to give a nice smooth surface for those flue and exhaust gases. For my flue caps, I'll be using these 1.5 inch clay tiles. These are 12 by 12. My flue is 13 wide. So I'll leave it gapped about 1/2 inch on each side, and I'll just add a little chamfer of fire clay here and here, and then sponge this edge, make sure everything's nice and tight. I'll still have plenty of bearing, even leaving that 1/2 inch.